Okay. Looks like we're good.
We're as good as we can get, man. This is going to be great.
That's it. I'm super pumped. Welcome everybody to episode 1 of Playing Small is Canceled. I was telling our first guest before we hopped on that the podcast, Instagram lives, we have that down to the science. This is actually our first time going live on LinkedIn. So if there's any hiccups, please bear with us. But without further ado, I'm super pumped to announce our first guest. And without further ado, on today's episode of Playing Small is Canceled, we have a very exclusive treat. He's a force for change, a disruptor in the world of coaching, and a beacon of innovation, big facts. Known as the #1 thought leader in coaching, he is the author of several books, including the hit bestseller, The Coaching Habit, which has garnered accolades and endorsements from industry leaders worldwide. No big deal. He's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and an extraordinary human being. Please welcome the insightful, transformative, and game-changing, the handsome Michael Bungay Stanier. How you doing, Michael?
Everybody was believing everything you said until you said handsome, and now we both just lost all sorts of credibility here. But thank you. That's a really kind introduction. The Coaching Habit is my big. I've written 9 books, but the Coaching Habit is the behemoth. It's sold 1.2, 1.3 million copies now, which is amazing, really. And actually a good story behind that around why not to play small as well. So I'm looking forward to digging into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into that for sure. I know the theme of today is kind of how to build good relationships. I don't know if there's anyone better walking God's green earth to talk about this with you. Let's start right there.
Yeah.
Why is it so important, and what is an effective strategy to start to cultivate strategic, great relationships?
Yeah, well, and it's perfect that we're doing this on LinkedIn and LinkedIn Live, because the key essence, the drum that I'm beating at the moment, is our happiness and our success are really strongly influenced by the quality of our working relationships. And if you don't want to take my word for that, just think for a moment about one of the rockiest, hardest working relationships you've had. Think back to what that experience was like. Think back to the impact it had on you. And you can feel yourself shrinking, right? You lose confidence, you lose a sense of competence, your work quality drops. Just everything gets a little bit worse. And on the other side, if you think about some of the very best working relationships that you've had, you think of that person and how you worked together and danced together and did great things together, you're like, man, we flew. We were awesome. We were more than the sum of our parts. And actually, it's nothing to do with the work. Sometimes we work with like great people on work that is a bit meh, and it's like fine. And sometimes we work with terrible people on what should be amazing work, and the experience sucks. So the quality of your working relationship really drives happiness and success, not to mention engagement and longevity and all those good things. But most people don't do much about it. They cross their fingers and they hope for the best. And what I'm suggesting is you want to more actively manage your working relationships. The goal is not to make everything beautiful, because that won't ever happen. The goal is to make the the key working relationships BPRs, the best possible relationship. Every working relationship has potential. How do you make yours fulfill its potential so it can be the best version of that working relationship?
I absolutely love this. And I think, there's an old expression from back in the day. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
And to an extent, it's hard to disagree with that.
Well, that's
Um,
true. That
yeah,
that and people join companies, but they leave managers. So you don't want to have that manager, and you don't want to be that manager. So when you can figure out who you work with and the best way of working with them, you really do start unlocking success. You really do, just to capture the name of this show, you stop playing small.
yeah, I love that. And even like we started to invest in stuff in companies, which is really exciting. But there's another term where you don't necessarily bet on the horse, right? In entrepreneurship, you bet on the jockey.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of those are you're playing at an entrepreneurial level. Lots of people, and the people who I think will be listening to this, they're like, I'm not investing in companies. I'm just trying to be a manager in this company, a big company, a small company, it doesn't matter. And that's who I'm really speaking to, people who interact with other human beings. And they're like, man, I wish this was better. I wish I worked better with this other person. And so when you're building a BPR, best possible relationship, what you're thinking about are three core elements. You need to make the relationship safe and vital and repairable. Those are the three elements. So let me just unpack those one by one.
Please.
Safe really gets its kind of insight from Amy Edmondson. So Harvard Business School professor, voted last year the #1 management thinker. She's really popularized and made commonplace this idea of psychological safety. Most people, like, I've heard of psychological safety. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's something I need to have people show up as their best to remove the fear. But Craig, if I'm honest, I've been in psychologically safe working relationships, and some of them are a bit boring. They're fine, but I don't just want safety. I also want vitality, and that's the second element, safe and vital. I want life. I want to be pushed. I want to be challenged. I want to be provoked. I want to be held accountable. One of my favorite lines is, we unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. So I want to work on the hard things. I don't just want to be safe. I want to have that kind of like that edge, because I know when I'm on the edge of myself, on the edge of my competence and my confidence and my sense of what I know, that's where I grow. That's where I'm learning. So I want safe and I want vital, and they kind of dance with each other. There's always intention with each other. But the third element is you need to be able to repair a working relationship, because no matter who you're working with and no matter how good it's been, at some stage, the wheels are going to fall off. I mean, you're working with Joe, who's producing this behind the scenes at the moment. You guys have a good working relationship, and if it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen. There's going to be a little rip in the fabric. He's going to let you down. You're going to let him down. Somebody didn't have breakfast and got grumpy. Somebody misunderstood a promise. Who knows what's going to happen? But you need to go, look, if this relationship matters, how do I get back and how do I repair those working relationships so that we get to make it last as long as possible?
This is unbelievable. And this is so much deeper than people might tuning in even realize. I would even go as far as to say, if there hasn't been friction yet, then you would have no idea how strong a relationship is. Because with no friction, there could be no light. And
I
it's
love it.
funny, yeah. And when I first started coaching a few years back, I used to avoid tough conversations a little bit because I didn't want to, hurt people's feelings and so forth. And I quickly got over that and realized, wait a minute, let me start leaning in and looking forward to the tough
Yeah.
conversations. Obviously, your delivery is important, but when you are able to call people out on their own BS or have those tough conversations,
Right.
those are the vessels that create the greatest opportunity for growth and expansion.
Yes. So I agree with you. And I think there's a way that you can make that easier for both parties in a working relationship. So the key tactic in this new book, How to Work with Almost Anyone, is something called a keystone conversation. And it's going to sound simple when I say it. In fact, it's going to sound like, yeah, wait, that's obvious when you put it like that. But a keystone conversation is, have a conversation about how you work together before you start working together. Or if you're already in the middle of a working relationship, which we all are, have a conversation with somebody about how you're doing and how you want to work with each other as you continue working with each other. So I'm going to pick on Joe again. It's like you and Joe, you're working together, and you're like, Craig, you're like, I'm not going to be shy about having tough conversations and calling him out on his BS if that's what's happening. And Joe, same with you. But if you've had a chance to sit down together and you go, hey, Joe, how do we work well together? Like when you've had a good boss and it's really worked and you felt supported and encouraged and pushed and challenged, what did that look like? How did we give feedback? How do we call each other out on our BS? And then you go, and Joe, let me tell you, when I've worked with people and I felt that they've been amazing to work with, this is what they did to me. And what you're doing is you're having a conversation about how you're going to have that conversation. So the first time I screw up and you call me on my BS, it's not a surprise. It's not an affront. It's not frightening. It's not confusing. I'm like, oh, yeah, we talked about this. We said that when I did this, this is what we do. And now we're doing it. It actually allows me to feel safer and to trust you more.
This is so good. This is straight up unbelievable. And even like in my spiritual studies now, like in regards to soulmates, totally different type of relationship. But what
Mhm.
I'm starting to understand is like those people that are in a relationship and it's just smooth sailing the whole time, never fighting anything. That's not your soulmate. That's a
Right.
body mate. Your
That's funny.
soulmate is someone that's meant to challenge you. You guys grow through some stuff together. It's a whole different reframe on looking at relationships. But I love what you're saying. I think this is really deep and really valuable for anyone that's trying to cultivate meaningful relationships in any line of life.
Yeah, I saw a cartoon once which just said the point of your soulmate is to push all of your buttons. And I'm like,
I believe
yeah,
it.
that rings true. I've been married for 30 some years and I'm like, yeah, like my wife is amazing and there's some buttons that she just manages to push. Here's an amazing, so as part of writing How to Work with Almost Anyone, Craig, I did a ton of study with, the kind of the really big names in kind of romantic relationship work. So people like Esther Perel and Terry Real and Dan Siegel and John Gottman. These are behemoths, big names who've just spent their careers trying to figure out romantic relationships. And there's a couple of things that I think are really interesting from those studies. The first is from John Gottman. John Gottman says 70% of issues in relationships are perpetual, meaning they don't go away. They don't get fixed. They're not even fixable. They just are going to be like that. And some people find that depressing. I find that really liberating for two reasons. One is it means I can just stop trying to fix the 70%. I'm like, that's just the way it is. Like with me and my wife, she's wired to say no, and I am wired to say yes. So when we go out, we're thinking of going out for dinner. I'm like, hey, how about we go to this new restaurant that's open up the road? I know she's going to say no. That's going to be her default response because she's like, you know what? Why would I go to something I don't know when I could go to something I do know? Whereas I'm wired to yes. I'm like, why wouldn't we go off and have an adventure and try and do something new? And it's clear to me that up until the day one of us dies, this will be the pattern. It's the 70% that's perpetual. But that means 30% of a relationship is mutable, it's changeable, it's improvable. And just imagine if you look at your key working relationships and went, wow, what if I could improve those 5 or 10 or 20 or even 30%? What a difference that would make. That makes me really optimistic. So there's a lot of wisdom around, how do you look at these big names that have thought about romantic relationships and bring them into our working relationships because there's a lot we can learn from that.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. And this is something that people can take with them in like we said, in intimate relationships, business, friendship, all the things. I think that what everybody really wants, and I have contrast now. Nobody really wants yes men or yes women underneath them. Like you
Right.
want people that's going to challenge you to create opportunities for you to excel and grow. And
Right.
that will come on the backside of, calling people out sometimes on what
Well,
they might not be seeing.
that's why you want to have a conversation with people eh, to actually let them know this. So, for your instance, you may sit down and go, look, I don't want yes men or yes women. I like to be pushed. I like to be challenged. I like it to be blunt. I like a bit of argy-bargy and a kind of confrontation. That to me is life. That to me is vitality. That might be great. I might go same but different. I might go, look, I don't want yes men, but I don't like fighting. I don't like conflict that much. So if you're going to disagree with me, I welcome that. But this is the way I like to be disagreed with. And then they can go, well, here's how I like to disagree with people. And we can kind of figure it out because it's so easy to think that people know what you want. And I can make up stuff that I think you want, but it's so much easier if you just tell me this is what I see in a valuable working relationship. I want a peer, I want an equal, I want challenge, I want provocation, I want to get in the ring and kind of figure this stuff out. That brings you to life. And people who are working with you, Craig, will go, great. That's not like my last job. That's not like my last boss. I'm going to have to adjust to that so that he and I get to build the best possible working relationships.
Yeah, this is so good. There's so many places we could take this conversation. I wanted to ask you just because we touched on it briefly. If you don't mind me asking, we'll get a little deep. What is your spiritual practices now? What do you subscribe to?
I'm I'm not sure I would call myself a spiritual person. So I'm certainly not I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in God. Um, but I spend a lot of time reflecting on myself in the world. So, one of the practices I have is journaling. Now is that spiritual? Is it not spiritual? I'm not totally sure. But, I start each day by going, what am I noticing? That's a question that helps me be present to myself, to what I'm feeling, to what I'm thinking, to what out the window. The second question I ask myself is, what do I want? That's kind of tapping into the kind of the bigger drivers for me and the impact I want to have in the world. And then the third question I ask myself is, what's the one thing today that I definitely need to do? So that I don't have one of those days where I do 57 out of 58 of my to-do list, but not the actual hard thing. And so, I've done a lot of work around self-awareness and self-growth, and I spend a lot of time marveling at the miracle of being alive on this planet in this moment and just how unlikely that is. You can call all of that spiritual if you want. I'm not sure that's language exactly that I would use.
Yeah, I would say definitely spiritual, and it means something different to everybody. Even journaling, and just
Yeah.
taking time and being by yourself a little bit and being mindful. I would say definitely, and I appreciate.
So what does spiritual mean to you, Craig? I mean, it's a big word, and this is
Yeah,
a big conversation.
it's a really big word. It's a really big conversation, and for me, if you're spiritual or you're enlightened, if you will, that means that you believe something beyond our logic, meaning that whatever's happening right now, me, you, this beautiful LinkedIn platform, coffee mug, and so forth, that's just a small piece
Right.
of all the other stuff that's going on. Whatever
Yeah.
it is that someone believes in, God, the creator, universe, whatever, really, just that there's something else that we can maybe tap into. And, I think based upon science, like, look, if somebody jumped out the window behind me, even if they were a really good person, gravity would have them go down.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there are universal laws too that you could tap into and you could see results
Yeah.
from, and that aren't, to the naked eye, so to
Yeah.
speak. Right. So I think that if you're a spiritual person, that means that you believe some stuff's happening beyond our logic.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, just on a science level, you think about dark energy and dark matter. It's like 97% of the mass of the universe is something that scientists aren't quite sure what it is.
Yeah.
And that blows my mind. And then you think of people who are, doing what people call plant medicine now. So taking some versions of hallucinogenic, and they're kind of like having ways of seeing the world that go beyond our kind of day-to-day quotidian experience of you and me and coffee and LinkedIn and the like. You have to go, there's ways of understanding this world that go well beyond the standard sensory experience that humans have. There's a great book by a science writer called Ed Young called, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's about the way animals experience the world and how they have a completely different and broader senses than humans have. What humans tend to do is they look at a dog or a lion or a fish and go, kind of like humans, but just a little bit different. But in fact, they're just vastly different. They just see the world completely different and experience the world completely different from human beings.
Yeah. It's really beautiful. And I love that we can have these types of big conversations, and everybody might have something else,
Right.
and that's more than okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever works for us. Um, I wanted to ask you one specific question that I think will be really valuable before we land the plane, and this is something that you talk about. And again, I think that you're the best in the world at talking about stuff like this, and that is, what is the difference between coaching for performance and
Yeah.
coaching for development?
Oh, that's a great question and really practical. Coaching for performance is, can you get the stuff done? And so it's often a label that's put on just telling people what to do. We're like, it's still the old command and control style of management, but we've made it sound better by calling it coaching for performance. Coaching for development is about how do you grow the person who's doing the work. So I think of it as like this: coaching for performance is a bit like you can see a fire in front of you, and you think to yourself, how do I build up the fire, or how do I put out the fire, or how do I bank the fire to keep it going? Your obsession is the fire. Coaching for development is the person standing next to the fire. And you're like, how do I help them do all of that? Because the fire gets your attention because it's bright and shiny. But the real power is enabling other people to learn, to grow, to give them the skills, increase their capacity and their confidence and their autonomy and their sense of self-sufficiency. So the short-term drive is always coaching for performance, but the real win is coaching for development, because that not only gets the stuff done, but it grows the person so they don't even need you the next time.
Yeah, so good. It reminds me of, I'm not sure how this was put, but it's something along the lines of, you can leave your kids like a whole bunch of money, or you can teach them how to hunt.
Right.
And if you develop them on how to hunt, then they'll
Right.
never go broke. They'll never have to worry about money ever again. Something not the same, but
Yeah, yeah.
something similar.
I just was on a trip with somebody who's a dad. I'm not a dad, so I don't know that much about parenting, but he had a very interesting perspective. He said, "Look, my job is to make my kids' life hard. Not easy, but hard. Because if I can get them to be hard and resourceful and resilient and can figure stuff out, then they're going to do fine in this world." And I thought that was a very slightly contrarian, but a really helpful thought around how do you bring out the best in people.
Talk about full circle. It's kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning, when we talked about relationships and leaning into the tough conversations,
Right.
because that's what's going to make them grow and expand and develop.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that when people hear the words personal development, sometimes they forget development. And
Right.
it's not enough to just hear it. We have to develop and apply it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like the interesting thing in this planet is our continual growth. I mean, spiritual, not spiritual, depends on the label you like, but I love the phrase, we unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. And
Yeah,
so for me, I'm always questing to go, what's the next hard thing for me that might push me and help me grow and help me learn and help me develop?
absolutely love it. We'll end up playing with this final nugget. And another one, this is so good because it's so valuable to everybody listening. I think we're hitting on topics that aren't niche, they're really applicable for everybody.
Yes.
One of the things that you dive deep on is the balance between listening and advising.
Yeah. So the way I say it is this. I encourage people to try and be more coach-like. I'm not trying to, even though I'm best known for the coaching habit, I didn't really write the coaching habit for coaches. I wrote it for normal people who like, there's something powerful in the technology of coaching. So I'm like, I'm not, nobody needs to be a coach, but it's really helpful if everybody is more coach-like. And so what I say about that is more coach-like means, can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? So it's not saying that advice is bad. Advice is really helpful. I mean, this podcast is full of you and me giving advice to people. So, we're living that. But often our advice is not as good as we think it is. And often our advice is better if it comes a bit later in the conversation rather than a bit earlier. So I'm not sure about a ratio about how much advice, but it's probably less than you're giving right now. And if you can just wait a little bit longer, it means that when your advice does come, it's going to be more useful, more targeted, more in service of that other person. What you're trying to do is break your default pattern of going, when somebody comes and needs something from me, my default reaction is to give them some advice and give them some solutions. Don't do that. Stay curious a little bit longer. Figure out what's really going on.
So good. Love getting together with you. Love building the friendship. Love all
Yeah,
that
thanks,
you
Greg.
are.
It's lovely to catch up again. We've been on the podcast and Instagram Live together, so
Yeah.
thanks for letting me kick off LinkedIn Live as your first guest. That's quite the honor.
It was an honor for us as well. I have so much love and respect for you. For our listeners, we're going to repurpose this to the other platforms as well. What are you most excited about right now? What's the best way for everybody to support you?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'm excited about. I mean, if you want to support me, come to mbs.works. That's the website, and that's where you'll find the books and the free bonuses and social media and all of that good stuff. Of course, you can follow me here on LinkedIn as well. Um, I'm excited about, I'm going to launch a little book club in June around the coaching habit. I'm going to do a little bit of teaching around that. We're still finalizing the details around that, but I've just spend the morning sketching out what I want to teach people, how I want to go deeper into the coaching habit. And I think that's going to be pretty special.
Yeah, love it all. We'll put all that in the show notes. Hang up for one sec. I'll connect with you after. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. for episode 1 of Playing Small is Canceled. And definitely check out all the awesome stuff Michael has going on, and thank me later.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.